Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm not buying books this year. Today I'm going to talk about popular romance books I haven't read. So this tag has been going around on BookTube about popular books various people haven't read. And I decided to go ahead and put my own spin on this because let's face it, I am pretty well read when it comes to romance novels. I have really eclectic taste and I have kind of a general genre interest. So even sometimes if I think I won't necessarily enjoy a book, I will often try it just to say that I've read it. or not even to say that I've read it, because it isn't really about bragging. It's about just kind of wanting to get a good cross-section of what's out there in romance. So today, instead of kind of talking about specific books I haven't read, because in some cases I think some of the things I haven't read are more like authors I haven't read, because a lot of these authors I think are generally speaking kind of popular, but I'm not sure that all of them have exactly like standout books that people would say, oh, well, if you haven't read X, you should really read this specific book. So yeah, talking about today popular authors I haven't read. And I have 5 of them. So I'm just going to go ahead and start at the top of my list. Where else would I start? It's been a long week, you guys. Okay, so the first author that I haven't read, and I'm sure everybody on BookTube is going to be like, really? How is that even possible? And that is Colleen Hoover. I have not read Colleen Hoover. I think when I first joined Instagram, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, there really weren't that many romance readers on Instagram. A lot of the people who were on IG were more like new adult readers. And so I just kind of like wandered away from it for a while. And of course now there are tons of people on Instagram who read romance. But at the time romance was definitely like more a Facebook centered phenomenon. So there really weren't anybody, reading romance on Instagram. And so I kept coming across this author, Colleen Hoover, and she seemed kind of like maybe romance adjacent, but like an author that maybe doesn't always have a happily ever after. And so I think I just kind of looked at her and said, you might not be for me. But of course, she's still incredibly popular and a ton of people have read her, and she's constantly in the Goodreads best romances of the year list. And so, yeah, I think it's time at least to try maybe one book. So if you have a Colleen Hoover recommendation, for sure leave that in the comments for me. The next author I haven't read is Danielle Steel. And anybody who has just heard me talk about Colleen Hoover is going to be like, who is Danielle Steel? Okay, so I think Danielle Steel started writing in like the 70s or 80s. And I remember growing up that my mother had, at least, 3 or 4 of her books on her shelf. Now, my mother is not a romance reader. And so and she really enjoyed writers like, I think the one that stands out to me the most is Maeve Binchy. So I kind of had the impression that Danielle Steel was kind of maybe more along those lines, kind of like a women's fiction family saga type writer than like a standard romance writer. I actually still don't know if that's true. I've never really looked her up with the intent of like reading one of her books. So yeah, if you're a longtime romance reader and you've read Danielle Steel, let me know if my perception is correct, because I'm a little bit baffled by her and her popularity. The third author I haven't read is Christina Lauren. And now she is very much more like kind of within my wheelhouse. I think a lot of people who have read people like Tessa Bailey or Alice Clayton or anybody who's like a really popular contemporary romance sort of hot contemporary romance reader, has mostly read Christina Lauren, and I just haven't. And this is even funnier because I met kind of one half of the Christina Lauren duo at a Polycon last month, and so it was a little bit awkward to sit and have drinks with one half of Christina Lauren without being able to say, "Oh my gosh, I love your books," because I haven't read one. Oops. The fourth person that I haven't read is Debbie Macomber. And I would say that I haven't read Debbie Macomber because it really just doesn't seem like she would be my kind of author. My impression is that she writes small town contemporary romances, and that is most definitely not my thing, with kind of like a lot of white people and maybe not a lot of sex. And I feel like kind of one of those things needs to be not true in order for me to enjoy a writer like I kind of perceive Debbie Macomber to be. That said, my library has a literal crap ton of her books. Like, if you go into the romance section in any of the Fairfax County Library branches, you will find a ton of her books. And so it would be really fairly low risk for me to pick one out and just read it. But I just haven't. So, yeah. No Debbie Macomber in my life. The last book, and the one that I actually left for last because I actually own one of her books, is Jude Deveraux. And this is The Black Lion. I have put this on my TBR for specific months. I have put it sort of like as like next up in the things I'm going to read next for years. I not only own this book in paperback, I actually own it in ebook, and also my library has it in ebook. Like, there is no reason why I haven't read Jude Deveraux, and I haven't. I think Jude Deveraux also wrote A Knight in Shining Armor, which is another book that I have. So that's pretty funny. Yeah, I own multiple books by this author and still haven't actually read her, which is sort of hilarious. Also because, like, this era of romance, this era particularly of historical romance, is like my jam. Yeah, I would say, yeah, this era of historical romance is my jam. These are the books that I will gravitate to as like my favorite, best romances. So the fact that in my like early teens, when I started reading romance, and when I came back to romance in like 2013 and started reading a bunch of historical romances from the library, and then since sort of developing an interest in romance history, romance genre history, still haven't read this. It's sort of funny that I haven't read this author. So this I'm going to read very soon, but since I've been saying that for 5 years, we'll see how that goes. So those are the 5 romance authors that I haven't read. If you have any recommendations for specific titles by any of these authors, Colleen Hoover, Danielle Steele, Christina Lauren, Debbie Macomber, or Jude Deveraux, please leave those in the comments because I think it's time to fill in the gaps in my romance education. That's about it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and have a good week. Doubt not, slay some words, and Lex has your back. Bye.